Welcome to the transport room. You have entered this room through the legs of a flag woman. Early mechanised transport in Europe worked using flagged signals. Carnival is a kind of transport that defies European conventions of navigation. The flag woman directs the carnival in dance. She gives control and soul to the band. Lord Kitchener sang, "You have no band without an experienced flag woman. The band will have no control and the music will have no soul." The revellers couldn't play the usual mass on Carnival Day. Women transport us from one world to the next. We enter this world through their thighs. This image is titled By Ox and Hammock. It is a stunning title, absenting the effort of the African people entirely, who are physically transporting these Europeans through Africa. The image is named after the hammock, a cloth bed, essentially a piece of furniture and object, and the animal, the ox. The hammock is carried and the ox is led by African people. The explorers have no navigational aids. This suggests the African people knew where they were going. So what exactly is being explored? Livingstone continued to explore, even when delirious, slumped in his carried hammock, suggesting he is shown what is already known, following existing transport routes, and not really discovering anything. African people were transporting Europeans by carrying them through the African continent. In the UK, white working class poor people were transporting wealthy white British people by carrying them too. The wealthy were carried in covered chairs with poles on them, known as sedans. The young boys that walked alongside the chairs with a torch to light the way were considered inherently amoral and very often the subject of sexual abuse by the wealthy transported men and women. Europeans saw the lack of wheeled vehicles on the African continent as proof of intellectual backwardness. The first thing Europeans wheeled onto the African continent was most likely a gun carriage. Trains were seen as a gift of the empire, but these often skewed existing local transport links and served to transport wealth out of the country. Before colonialism, administrative regions grew in circles like a mandala. An administrative area was as far as you could walk in a day. The idea of ruling a territory further than you could communicate effectively with was just considered absurd. John Agnew writes about the territorial trap, which assumes the European way of thinking about transport and territory is the only logical way to do so. Before the Windrush reached British shores, Joe Clough was driving London buses in the UK. Many of the routes that London buses run to this day are affected by Septimus Severus, the Black Roman Empire whose military presence in the UK led to the walls that defined the square mile of the City of London. Janet Lewis, Lord Kitchener's flagwoman, sits with her flag. The Ashanti in particular maintained roads as spiritual spaces. Across the diaspora, roads and crossroads continue to have spiritual significance. Ben Okri's book, The Famished Road, introduced some of this to British audiences. Belly Mujinga was a transport worker, one of the many black and brown men and women that were key workers working through COVID. A customer spat on her and Belly contracted COVID shortly after and died. She was not issued with PPE. Even before this incident, her working life was marred by managerial racism. It took 7 weeks to open a case, and after only 19 days of investigation, her case was closed. Her family are still without recompense or justice.